Question is the bill be now read the second time. The Honourable Member for Nelson, I was just about to give you the call.
Thank you, Mr President. I rise to speak on the Expungement of Historical Offences Amendment Bill 2025 with a full heart today. It's a wonderful day. This will be a good day in this place. And there's so many days we don't get a chance to say that. And today we most certainly will be able to say it. And I'm honoured to be here as part of today as we consider and support this bill through our chamber. Mr President, it's a bill on this sort of topic and work that we do on it that puts me in mind of Martin Luther King Jr.'s quote, which I hold very close to my heart, and that's that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And I hold that to be true. In fact, I hold it as a North Star sometimes. And I think anybody who is active in advocacy on matters of social justice, on matters of human rights, on matters of human decency, that sentiment is something that is needed to be tracking against effort, because sometimes effort comes again and again and it doesn't necessarily come to fruition as quickly as you'd like or in the way that you would like, but effort over time takes us towards justice, and that's what's happened here. Having said that, Mr President, justice sometimes is far too long delayed and far too long coming, and I would imagine that there has been genuine concern and frustration about various delays of this work. And I acknowledge that we have been decades in the making here, and Tasmania, again, quite incredibly and positively, will have gone from being the last jurisdiction to decriminalise homosexuality back in 1997, when we were lagging everybody. And then we stepped into a more proactive space with our anti-discrimination legislation being quite an exemplar. And then we moved forward. And I recognise previous Premier Will Hodgman and his efforts with the Expungement of Historical Offences Act in 2017 and where that took us forward. And now, through continued work, through the independent review of that bill, the recommendations made, we're now in a position to be considering legislation which will further improve the Expungement of Historical Offences Act and bring to fruition now all 13 of the recommendations from that Act. And it's been efforts by so many people across time to get us to this point, not least Mr Rodney Croome, who's here with us today in the chamber and who I also recognise, along with other members, for absolute courageous persistence and effective advocacy over time with this, and Equality Tasmania as the organisation that he sits with and around him in these efforts. But I also recognise the work done in this place by persistent advocates in a parliamentary and legislative sense, not least the Greens, who ensured that what we had in this bill was not just 12 of 13 excellent recommendations, but was all 13 of those recommendations to be addressed and brought to fruition. Legislative activism is really important. It's an important element of making improvements to our governance in the state, to our statutes and to our policy. And it should always be acknowledged when it has contributed to forward progress. And it is disappointing that it wasn't adequately acknowledged, I think, formally in the government's address on this bill, but I certainly put my acknowledgement here. We only rectified and improved this bill, rectified the gaps and improved this bill because of the effort and the impetus thrown into it by the Greens. And also, I would note, by the opportunity presented by a minority parliament. Yep. So again, those efforts and advocacy, I'm sure, still would have been brought forward by the Greens, but in a majority parliament would have been blocked in the other place, and that would have been the end of it. They wouldn't have been able to make amendments to the bill there. So my applause and thanks to all members of our Parliament who look to be advocates and to be thoughtful in their pursuit of legislative activism, and particularly who look to engage with the opportunity of a minority parliament. On that, Mr President, I'm appreciative of the expert work that's gone into that independent review by Melanie Bartlett and Taya Katala-Jones, and the fact that we're able to give effect to each of those recommendations now. I absolutely acknowledge the work of the Gender and Equality Committee, who took the referral for the elements relating to redress, and have done excellent work. And it's, as the member for Rumney pointed out too and acknowledged, I also acknowledge that the work of committees is incredibly fruitful, not just for what comes out the other end of it in a report and recommendations, but in the process itself, because it is always educative of the parliamentarians who are involved, of the broader Parliament via the work that they present to us, and also of the community, because the work of a committee is done in public, it's accountable, it's on the public record, becomes part of a parliamentary record. So there's real value there in the process that was undertaken by the committee. At the time, I didn't vote for it to go into committee either, because I was hopeful we could get this bill passed a year ago. But in retrospect now, I think it's come out in an incredibly positive way to have undergone that process, to have had the recommendation from the committee and to arrive here where we are. Having said that, my goodness, the 2 prorogations of Parliament that have held this bill up in these latter stages have been incredibly frustrating. So we now have a bill that's complete, I think. We will have, through this amendment bill, a primary piece of legislation that is improved, that sets up appropriate processes. I'm not going to go into each of them in detail, as the government has covered it in the second reading speech. Other members have spoken in some detail about specific elements. We have had it flagged with us that there are maybe some future further elements for discussion, but there is not a need to hold this up further in looking to rectify some of those matters as well. I'm particularly pleased to have it drawn to my attention that one of those matters for future consideration relates to families of deceased persons who can seek for an expungement of their family member's criminal record but can't access the redress element of what's outlined in this bill. There's a complexity around that needs to be looked at carefully before we think about how to take that forward. So I hope that proactive work is done. I'm incredibly pleased to hear expert stakeholders point to this Tasmanian approach now as given effect to in this bill as being best practice, as being nation leading, as being a gold standard of human rights. All of those things fill me with pride for our state. And when you think about the bookends of this, in this particular situation of decriminalisation in 1997 and here in 2025, another opportunity to be a gold standard, a nation leader, to be the jurisdiction others can look to and seek to emulate, is incredibly pleasing and fills me with pride. And while we can take that pride, Mr President, I do also remain concerned, though, about the what happens next part. Once this is passed and once we have that approach laid out nicely, the thing that does concern me still about that is the challenge of how we make sure that the people who need to benefit from this do in fact benefit from this. We've heard throughout the numerous discussions on this bill as it's come and gone in this place about the fact that many of the Tasmanian men to whom this is relevant, who have those criminal charges and convictions there on their record, are now quite elderly. They've also dispersed in many senses to various parts of our state, but also into other states and also internationally. And sometimes that has actually been, in a sense, an exile because of what they suffered and what they were forced to endure via their criminal charges and convictions. So one of the things that bothers me is that we appear to be setting ourselves up to take a fairly passive approach to implementing and giving effect to this, what's in this bill, particularly the expungement and the redress, I should say, elements of it. Often what we do with these sort of things is we put some ads in papers and say there's this thing that's happened and it might be relating to you and please come forward. That passive approach where we expect people to come to us as the state in order to be able to access their rights is, I think, not acceptable. It's not good enough, actually. I think when we're talking about something with such a significant historical profile of active harm, active discrimination, active cruelty that was embodied in the criminalisation of homosexuality and the charges and sufferings that resulted from that, as part of appropriate justice and redress, we need to have an active, proactive outreach approach to ensuring that we give effect to what we hope can be a shadow of an offering from the state to say that we're sorry and say that we recognise that harm and the impact that it had on people's lives enduringly. So I think it's unacceptable for us to do anything less than to, in good faith, seek to make contact with, seek to find and seek to offer what's in this bill to the people who were affected by it. That won't always be possible, Mr. President. Certainly we know it's not possible for those who have already passed away, but we can also seek to talk to reach out to their families. We can seek to, in good faith, find those who are still alive. For a government to perhaps suggest that that effort is too much effort or too expensive an effort, I think is small. I think that's a small way to regard the fundamental principle and importance of that principle that sits behind this. So I would like to see us have a good faith, proactive effort to find the Tasmanian men who are relevant to what we're legislating here and to make them, to actively offer them their rights via this legislation. That would be compassionate and that would be right to do so. Mr. President, I'll conclude my remarks again just by adding a broad acknowledgement again, my admiration and acknowledgement and my thanks actually on behalf of myself but also those I represent in the community for the enduring efforts of the LGBTIQA+ community, advocates, experts, allies and all those who've brought efforts to bear to move things forward across a whole range of areas and in this instance on this matter of the expungement of historical offences and the proper redress for that. As I said at the beginning, Mr. President, the arc of the moral universe is long and it is through the true efforts of courageous, persistent advocates that arc does in fact bend towards justice, and long may that continue. So I wholeheartedly support this bill.